Okay, let's dive in. We're looking today at, well, a really extraordinary public spat.
Hmm.
It basically erupted, according to our sources,
Yeah.
between two figures who, they command massive power, right? One in tech and industry, the other, well, the highest level of politics.
We're talking Elon Musk and President Donald Trump, of course.
Exactly.
And for this deep dive, we're sticking strictly to the reporting we've seen from Sky News and BBC News, published around June 5th and 6th, 2025.
Right.
Our goal here is really to, cut through the noise. We want to pull out the key details from these articles. What actually kicked off this feud?
Which seemed to come out of nowhere.
Right. How did it blow up so fast? And importantly, what were the real-world consequences? We're basing this entirely on what those reports tell us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because what these sources seem to show is this incredibly sudden pivot. It went from what looked like a pretty close alliance.
Yeah, almost a love-in, one source called it.
Right, into this just volley of public attacks, really specific threats, and then this huge hit to, well, one of the world's most valuable companies.
It really shows you how fast things can change at that level.
So let's set the scene based on what's reported. Just the week before this all kicked off, Musk had apparently just finished a stint as a special government employee.
Right, inside the Trump administration.
Yeah. And our sources say this involved him leading something called the Department of Government Efficiency. They called it DOGE, apparently.
DOGE, yeah. Tasked with cutting government waste. That was the idea reported.
And the whole thing was described in these reports as like a show of unity.
Even a political love-in, as I mentioned, it really painted this picture of cooperation.
But wow, what the reports make clear is just how fragile that was.
Incredibly fragile. That apparent harmony lasted, get this, only about 48 hours, according to the sources.
38 hours, it's barely 2 days. And the spark, the thing that reportedly lit the fuse, Musk launched what the sources called a blistering attack on Trump's big signature tax and spending bill.
Ah, yes, the
Trump
big.
apparently called it the one big beautiful bill.
Which sounds very Trump.
It does. But Musk, according to these reports, was less impressed. He called it a big, ugly bill.
Or even, I think one source said, a disgusting abomination.
Wow. Okay. So, not holding back.
Not at all. And that's like the immediate insight from the sources right there. Despite this recent collaboration, this policy disagreement, specifically on this massive bill, was enough to just shatter that public unity. Almost instantly.
Yeah, it really highlights the friction points, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even when things look smooth on the surface.
Exactly.
And Trump, well, the reports say he didn't waste any time hitting back.
Nope. He used his platform, Truth Social.
Right. And he expressed pretty clear disappointment. The sources say he even speculated Musk might have Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, suggesting he missed being in government, basically.
The reporting actually includes some pretty blunt quotes from his posts. Things like he was very disappointed in Elon.
Mm-hmm. And that he'd helped Elon a lot.
Yeah, and also claimed Elon was wearing thin. I asked him to leave,
Yeah.
and he just went crazy.
So that's Trump's reported side of how it, went down.
And he didn't just stop at, like, personal criticism. The sources detail a really significant escalation here.
Mm-hmm.
A direct threat from Trump.
Mm-hmm.
He threatened to cancel government contracts with Musk's businesses.
Yeah, and that's where it moves beyond just, a Twitter spat or whatever.
So,
Threatening government contracts, that brings in a potentially huge financial angle, especially for companies like SpaceX, Tesla, others that rely heavily on government deals. The reports really stress that.
so Musk's response, again, according to the reports, was just as public, just as defiant, played out mostly on X, his platform.
Right.
The sources detailed several specific things he fired back with. He directly denied Trump's version of the bill, tweeted false, and claimed it was passed in the dead of night.
He also seemed to, lean into the whole political disruption angle, too. He pinned a poll, didn't he? Asking about creating a new political party.
Yeah. And the BBC report noted, a really high percentage voted yes on that.
Interesting. And Sky News mentioned he shared a post calling for Trump's impeachment.
So really going for it. Plus, the sources reported this pretty striking claim Musk made about the election itself.
Oh, yeah.
He apparently claimed he was responsible for Trump getting reelected, saying, without me, Trump would have lost the election.
Wow. Okay. That's a big claim.
Huge. And he also doubled down on the economic worries, saying Trump's tariffs would, quote, cause a recession in the second half of this year.
Okay, so hitting on policy, hitting on politics, hitting on the election.
But then the most controversial part reported, and maybe where things got really sharp,
Mm-hmm.
was Musk's claim, reportedly made without any evidence, that Trump appears in unreleased files related to Jeffrey Epstein.
Oof. Yeah, that definitely took things to another level. A really serious allegation to make, especially without proof.
And the Sky News report actually quotes the specific X post. It was, at Real of 4, Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Mark this post for the future. The truth will come out.
Yeah. And this detail, it really brings up a crucial point the sources tried to contextualize.
Right.
They pointed out that Trump was named in some previously released Epstein documents. That's true. But, and this is key, no allegations of actual wrongdoing were made against him in those specific records.
Okay.
There was an accuser who mentioned being at a Trump casino, but she didn't say she met him or accuse him of anything. And, Trump had called Epstein a terrific guy years ago, but they reportedly fell out later.
Right, I remember that history.
And while Trump had promised to release more files, and some were released by the AG back in February, the sources say those didn't really contain major new dirt on Epstein or his associates.
So Epstein himself died by suicide in 2019, awaiting trial.
Correct. So as the Sky News report sort of frames it, Musk's claim really taps into these ongoing conspiracy theories about some secret, unreleased stash of files.
Gotcha. And what were the reported reactions to that specific claim?
Well, the White House, according to sources, called Musk's comment unfortunate, and they linked it, interestingly, back to his unhappiness over the tax bill.
Trying to frame it as sour grapes, maybe.
Perhaps. And the FBI, when asked, reportedly just gave a no comment.
Which isn't surprising, I guess, but it definitely shows how quickly this whole thing escalated into, well, extremely sensitive and, frankly, unverified territory.
Exactly. And this wasn't just contained to, online arguments. The sources detail these immediate, very real consequences.
Yeah, let's talk about those. The most immediate seemed to be Tesla, right?
Oh, absolutely. Both reports highlighted a really significant drop in the stock price. One said 14%, another noted it was over 15%, potentially the worst single-day drop since, 2020.
And a drop like that, I mean, it's not just a number on a screen. That wiped, what, roughly $150 billion off Tesla's market value?
Yeah, pushed it back under that $1 trillion mark.
And the reports even captured the feeling, didn't they? There was that quote from an investor watching it all unfold in horror.
Yeah, saying, can someone please take the phone away from him?
That one quote tells you so much, doesn't it, about how investors saw this public behavior impacting the company.
It really does. And the threats about contracts, they weren't just vague either. Trump's post, as quoted, was pretty specific.
What was it again?
The easiest way to save money is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts.
Wow.
And the reports add the context there. Musk's companies have received at least $38 billion over the years. That's in government contracts, loans, subsidies, tax credits, the works.
So real money, real leverage being threatened.
Absolutely.
And Musk's reported response to that threat, it sounds like he wasn't backing down.
Not at all. The quote reported was, "Go ahead, make my day."
Okay, channeling Clint Eastwood there.
Seems like it. And he followed up with a really specific threat about SpaceX, which the sources flagged.
What was that?
He reportedly said SpaceX will begin decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately if Trump followed through.
Decommissioning Dragon. But isn't that crucial?
That's exactly what the reports highlight. The Dragon is described as the only U.S. spacecraft currently available to ferry crews up to the International Space Station.
And it was developed with NASA funding, right?
Correct. So threatening to pull it basically threatens a critical piece of U.S. space infrastructure, all tied into this personal feud.
So what did NASA say? Were they quoted?
Yeah, the reports included NASA's response. They basically said they would continue to work with our industry partners to ensure the president's objectives in space are met.
Sounds like careful diplomatic language there.
Very careful. And the sources also add that broader context, about how much the U.S. government, including the Department of Defense with classified stuff, relies on Musk's companies like SpaceX and Starlink. And of course, Musk himself holds a security clearance.
So the stakes are incredibly high, way beyond just stock prices.
Absolutely. And then there's the political fallout the sources discuss.
Right. Back to the bill itself.
Yeah, Musk's very loud opposition to the big, beautiful bill could, as reported, make it harder for Republicans to keep everyone in line to pass it.
And it seemed to, energize some hardliners.
Apparently so. The reports mention Trump allies like Steve Bannon suggesting really extreme actions, He was quoted saying things like, "Seize SpaceX tonight."
See SpaceX.
Yeah. And there was speculation reported that Trump might actually use the, levers of government against Musk.
While Musk, on the other hand, has the kind of money to potentially fund political challengers against Trump or his allies.
Exactly. It sets up this potential power struggle using different kinds of weapons, so to speak.
And the Democrats and all this.
According to the sources, they're mostly just watching from the sidelines. They apparently see potential upside in Republicans fighting amongst themselves.
Makes sense.
One strategist was quoted saying something like, anything that Musk does that moves more toward Democrats hurts Republicans.
Right. And the whole feud itself could just drown out other political news, couldn't it?
Yeah, the reports suggest it has that potential to just dominate the conversation.
Okay, so based on everything these sources laid out for us, let's try and, connect the dots a bit. What's the bigger picture here?
Well, I think the main insight that really jumps out from the reporting is that this isn't just like two famous guys yelling at each other online.
Right, it feels bigger than that.
It's a real high-stakes collision between different kinds of massive power. You've got the ultimate political authority on one side, and on the other, the power that comes from controlling enormous wealth, critical technology, and these huge digital platforms like X.
And the fight is playing out very, very publicly across those platforms.
Exactly.
It does make you think, as the sources kind of hinted, this isn't entirely new for Musk, is it? His public shifts, particularly towards the right.
No, and the reports mentioned that his earlier alignment with right-wing politics reportedly did hurt the Tesla brand before. There were protests. It supposedly affected sales back during Trump's first term.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
But interestingly, the reports included some different analyst views this time around.
Oh.
One analyst apparently suggested this specific fight, this spat with Trump, might actually help the Tesla brand.
Help it. How?
Well, the report cited maybe the country's forgiving nature in these kinds of public dramas. It was just one perspective, though.
Okay. Because there was another view, too, right?
Yeah, another analyst cited apparently compared Musk's image issues to, like, a young Bill Gates, suggesting, public perception can change over time, but questioning whether this kind of conflict is really the thing that brings actual buyers back to Tesla right now.
Right. Especially when, as the sources also point out, all this drama raises questions about his focus.
Exactly. His attention seems so divided, it casts doubt, reportedly, on his dedication to core projects, like the whole robo-taxi thing in Austin.
Yeah, especially when competitors are apparently already operating there. So really, the feeling you get from the reports, the thing that stands out, is just the sheer unpredictability of it all.
Totally. One source was quoted saying, basically, you just don't know what they might do next.
And the BBC report had that quote from Musk himself, didn't it? Contrasting his own expected longevity.
Right, saying something like, I will be around for 40 plus years.
Versus Trump having, what, 3.5 years left as president?
Yeah, which adds this whole other dimension, doesn't it, about the perceived time frame and maybe the stakes for each of them in this conflict.
So quite a deep dive. We've unpacked, based on these sources, the sort of shocking speed of this falling out.
How quickly it turned.
The specific flashpoints the reports flagged the bill, that unverified Epstein claim, the contract threats.
And trace the immediate consequences, especially for Tesla's stock.
Right, and the potential ripple effects for, government operations like NASA and the whole political landscape, all drawn straight from that reporting by Sky and the BBC.
It's quite a story.
It really is. So considering everything we've just discussed, drawn only from these reports, the huge financial impact on Tesla, the potential disruption to really critical government functions with SpaceX, the hints of political maneuvering, funding challengers, trying to kill legislation, what does this incredibly public, high-stakes fight between a top CEO and a president tell you about how power, markets, politics, and even essential infrastructure are all tangled together in our world today?